My past before I knew Christ. Well, I was kind of raised in the church, but it never really clicked. And so my grandmother had me involved up until, my dad got custody of me and took me away. And so for that, everything kind of fell by the wayside. It wasn't really, my teenage years were probably the biggest milestone. My life was a mess. I came to realize I was a lesbian at 17. And I hated myself. And my family and I were at odds. And, I was suicidal. And my life was a wreck. My grandparents are amazing. My grandfather's since passed, but growing up, they pretty much raised my older sister and I. So they've always been rock stars in that. So, kind of my background is I come from an abusive home. My father, when he remarried, we had moved out of the family home, and I don't know, it was just like a light switch got flipped one day, and this guy that I looked up to, the dad who just loved on us kids, he just changed in an instant, and it became a not so great situation. And so, for 4 years, emotional abuse, physical abuse, so a lot of brokenness, probably one of the darkest seasons of my life. My family and I were at odds with each other. The previous youth group, some of my best friends came from that youth group, and when they found out that I was gay, I lost everything. I lost my friends. Like I said, my family and I were at odds with each other. I hated myself. It got to a point where I didn't care whether I really lived or died. After 17, 18, I wasn't suicidal. I just didn't care. I didn't feel like I had much to live for. I was being young and dumb, so I got to drinking, and my life just kept going in a downward spiral, and I didn't really expect to live to see, 21 at that point. I don't know. When I was in town, I would just get struck with the need to go to church. And I knew I couldn't go back to my old church. And I really didn't want to. The one place that I'd kind of always felt accepted was at Vineyard. So that's what I did. I'd come to Vineyard when I was in Lancaster. And there was this one point where I was about ready to walk away from the church. I lost my faith in the church. I'd lost my faith in humanity. I'd been to a church in the town that I was living in, and they had pretty much been like, your kind's not welcome here, and pretty much told me not to come back. So at that point, I was just kind of over organized religion. But for some reason, one Sunday I was in town, and I just really felt like I needed to come. And so I'd shown up, and it was the strangest thing, I was just sitting there. It was the end of service, and this woman just comes walking over, and she sits down, and she's like, I know this is going to sound weird, but I got this picture. And she's like, do you mind if I share it? And I was like, well, I guess, sure, why not? And she was just like, your life is like this red ball of yarn, and it's just completely coming unraveled. And it was kind of like at that moment I looked at her and I just started bawling. And so like we just kind of sat there and talked for a minute, and then she was like, oh, by the way, she was like, my name is Joe. And yeah, it was at that point where it's just like, there's something there has to be a God to have somebody on, like, what I figured would be the last time I stepped foot in a church actually meet me where I was at and just be able to kind of tell it like it is. And I didn't know her from Adam, you know, and for her to just pretty much read my mail, I was like, whoa. So that started to kind of give me that little nudge of faith of, you know, maybe there is something to staying in church. That's actually when I met Amber and Andrew, and it was actually before they got married. And Amber had introduced herself, and, you know, she was just like, hey, we're doing this after church. Why don't you come join us? I was like, okay, sure. You know, and I think in a way that right there is what really kind of brought me back was, here are some really cool people. Obviously, you know, I'm not hiding who I am at this point in life. And they were still like, hey, come hang out. So, you know, finally I moved closer to town, so I was able to start attending church more regularly. And about that time is when they started up, you know, Whetstone as a small group. And I reconnected with Amber and Andrew, and that's where I met, you know, Sarah Bay and Mickey and Kelsey, and just it was great, you know. They really, I think the thing that really kept me coming back was they knew who I was at that point, and they didn't care. They just met me where I was at, and they loved me where I was at. And I think that was the most powerful thing that anybody could do at that time in my life, when it was already such a wreck, and, you know, nobody was really sticking around, but they did. We went to Firehouse Revival, and I don't know what it was exactly about that, but God just really got a hold of me in a way that I never expected. Now, like I said, I came from a really strict background, and so it took me even a couple of years to really get used to Vineyard. So walking into a pretty charismatic, you know, type church, that was completely new, you know, for me. And you know, that was the first time I actually remember getting touched by the Holy Spirit. And that was just, you know, for me, that there was just this moment in time where I was just on the floor, and, you know, God was like, are you ready? And I was just kind of like, okay. And that just opened up a whole brand new world to me. So I think I've kind of known what my purpose, like a general purpose, is kind of all along, and that's just to serve others. I mean, I've always loved, you know, dealing with people. And, you know, for the most part, minimum wage jobs. And if that's all that meant, I'm cool. You know, I got to meet some really cool people. I've got to share, you know, a little bit of my story with people. You know what I mean? And so just in a general sense, my heart has always been to serve people. So a little bit about my background is that, you know, I'm Thai American. So I've always kind of had a love for Thailand. And we don't have anybody that's involved in Thailand, but, you know, the Bennett's had Grace Village, and that's actually where it kind of all began. Is, you know, they were taking care of kids, and for me, that was it. I love kids, you know, and especially, I love the underdog, the story of the underdog. That's, you know, I think that's what I love most about people. And And so there'd been a couple of trips before where they had gone to China, for a week or two to help with the babies, for Chinese New Year, or I think there was I forget what the other time was for, but I'd always wanted to go, and every time I went, I went to pray and ask about it, God was just like, nope, not yet. And then not only was it a no, not yet, but he made it completely impossible for me to just be like, well, it's what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. So I really didn't have the option. It was a no. And so the last trip that we went on in 2017, when we heard about it, I just kind of started praying, and I was like, God, I've asked you before, and I know you're probably going to say no, but I'm going to go ahead and ask again. And so it was a yes this time. And so I was really excited because I'm just like, yes, 2 weeks with some cute little kids and just loving on kids. So I guess you could say it was kind of a shock when God was like, you're not going for 2 weeks though. Like, well, what? And I think that was when it kind of started. And it's funny because even in that moment, God was like, you want to go to Thailand? That's always been, a desire in my heart is to go to Thailand. He's like, I'll let you go to Thailand, but you have to go to China first. And I actually wasn't fond of the Chinese at this point in time in life. I try to stay up to date and current with what's going on in the world. So I kind of knew, about, China's leadership and what they were doing. And I was just kind of like, I don't know if I could get behind that. Like, it's a communist country. Like, what? But that completely changed, though, when we landed. When we landed in China and really started to meet the people and, and then got to meet these babies. Like, my heart just exploded with love for them. And, God taught me in all of that, too, that you can love a people and not love their government. They're two different things. And it really took going and having my feet on the ground and really mixing with the locals and talking to, the different people to really begin to understand that these are some really great people. These are some really great people. So, for somebody who's struggling to find their purpose, just don't give up. Just God planted something in you. And it's whatever you're really probably the most passionate about. That's going to start leading you towards your purpose. So there's this verse that I've found, and I discovered it when I was in school last year with the DTS, but it's something that I've really started to cling to, and it's something that I would tell anybody who's looking for their purpose, and it's simply this. It's Psalm 27:14, and it says, here's what I've learned through it all. Don't give up. Don't be impatient. Be entwined as one with the Lord. Be brave and courageous and never lose hope. Yes, keep on waiting, for he will never disappoint you. And I think that pretty much says it all. Just don't give up, If you have to hit your knees every day, a couple of times a day, then do it. Because, every yes will lead to something. It was a small yes for me, saying yes to going to China, that opened the doors for what my calling is. So never be afraid to say yes and just never give up hope.